Have you ever been threatened with a $1,000 fine because your emergency generator was emotionally incompatible with the neighborhood's visual harmony? Because I have. And let me tell you, standing in your driveway during a thunderstorm blackout, holding a certified HOA violation notice in one hand and a flashlight in the other while your refrigerator slowly transforms into a warm biology experiment, gives a man a very specific kind of spiritual clarity. My name is Travis Monroe, and I lived in a neighborhood called Briar Hollow Estates, which was the kind of place where people said community standards with the same tone medieval kings used when ordering executions. Every house had matching stone mailboxes. Every lawn looked like it had been trimmed with surgical lasers. Every garbage can disappeared from the curb with the precision of a magic trick, and presiding over this beige kingdom of fear was Denise Whitaker. Denise was the HOA president, a woman who wore white linen pantsuits, pearl earrings, and the permanent facial expression of someone smelling smoke in a restaurant. She drove a powder blue golf cart with a little brass placard on the front that said Board Authorized, which, in her mind, apparently meant constitutionally empowered to ruin mornings. She had fined neighbors for visible garden hoses, porch chairs angled too conversationally, and one retired man's wind chime because it created unapproved emotional movement. But her greatest enemy was my generator. Now, before you imagine some industrial diesel monster belching smoke like a war machine, let me clarify. It was a standard portable backup generator. Black and yellow. Loud enough to notice, sure, but not loud enough to summon federal agencies. I bought it after the third power outage in 2 months nearly destroyed 2 freezers full of meat, my home office equipment, and the medication my father kept refrigerated whenever he stayed with me. My father was 74, stubborn as a mule, and diabetic. When storms rolled through, I didn't worry about candlelight ambience. I worried about insulin temperature, oxygen concentrator backup power, and whether the sump pump would quit long enough to turn my basement into an indoor pond. So I bought the generator. I stored it neatly beside the garage, behind a small lattice screen, exactly where the fire department's safety pamphlet said to keep portable generators, outdoors, ventilated, dry, and far away from windows. Apparently, Denise preferred medical emergencies to visual inconvenience. The first time she saw it, she didn't say hello. She didn't ask why I had it. She simply stopped her golf cart at the end of my driveway, removed her sunglasses, and whispered, "Oh no." I was carrying a bag of ice from my truck because the power had been out for 4 hours. "Oh no what?" I asked. She pointed one manicured finger toward the generator. That is keeping my fridge cold." "That," she said, stepping out of the cart like a detective approaching a corpse, "is a utility apparatus visible from common roadway sightlines. It's behind lattice. It is emotionally visible." I blinked. "Denise, objects are either visible or not visible. They do not have emotional visibility." She opened a folder so thick it looked like it contained state secrets. Section 9, Paragraph D of the Briar Hollow Exterior Preservation Code states that generators, compressors, storage tanks, utility boxes, pumps, mechanical equipment, and other unattractive service devices must be fully screened or hidden from view using approved architectural concealment. "It is screened." "With lattice," she said, making the word sound like a slur. "Temporary lattice, cheap lattice, utility-grade lattice." "It came from a hardware store, Denise, not a crime scene." She slapped a yellow violation notice against my garage door. $500. 48 hours to remove or conceal the generator behind an approved permanent enclosure. Failure to comply would result in daily fines, suspension of clubhouse access, and referral to the Architectural Enforcement Committee. I stared at the paper. Rainwater dripped off the gutter beside us. "My dad's medication is in that fridge," I said quietly. Denise smiled with professional emptiness. "Medical circumstances do not override aesthetic obligations." That sentence did something important. It ended the part of me that still wanted to be reasonable. I looked at my generator. I looked at her clipboard. I looked at the dark houses around us, all waiting for the power company to remember we existed. Then I looked back at Denise. "You want it hidden?" "Yes." "Or disguised as something approved?" Her smile tightened. "Approved decorative structures are allowed, if tasteful." I nodded slowly. Tasteful. Decorative. Approved. If you're watching Sovereign Verdict, subscribe now, because Denise Whitaker had just made the worst mistake of her HOA career. She told me to hide my generator. She never said it couldn't become a nuclear facility. The second the power came back on, I did not celebrate like a normal person. Normal people hear the refrigerator kick back to life, reset the microwave clock, and move on with their lives. I walked straight into my home office, still damp from the storm, still holding Denise's violation notice, and downloaded the entire Briar Hollow Estates governing document. 287 pages. That is not a rule book. That is a hostage manifesto with landscaping requirements. I brewed coffee strong enough to qualify as a controlled substance, and started reading. Denise had quoted the generator rule correctly. Section 9, paragraph D, did require unattractive mechanical equipment to be screened or hidden. The words, "fully concealed from common roadway sightlines," appeared 3 times, which told me Denise had probably highlighted them in her own copy, with the kind of joy normal people reserve for wedding photos. But then, buried 12 pages later under Community Education and Thematic Decorative Installations, I found the sentence that made me sit up straight. Scale model educational displays, historical replicas, miniature civic structures, decorative architectural installations, and themed landscape features may remain visible when presented as ornamental, non-habitable, non-commercial structures. I read it again. Then I read it a 3rd time, because there are moments in life when you can actually hear the universe. Slide a loaded weapon across the table. Miniature civic structures, themed landscape features, educational displays. Denise wanted my generator hidden behind an approved permanent enclosure. The rules allowed decorative structures. The generator could not be visible. Fine. The generator would not be visible. It would be inside a miniature nuclear power plant. I opened a blank document and typed the title. Briar Hollow Emergency Energy Education Display. Then I started designing the most aggressively unnecessary generator enclosure in American suburban history. The plan was simple. The generator would sit exactly where it already sat, on its legal concrete pad beside the garage, safely ventilated and away from windows. Around it, I would build a removable, fire-safe enclosure, shaped like a tiny nuclear power plant. 2 cooling tower-style vent chimneys, a fake control building, gray industrial panels, yellow and black caution striping, and a tiny sign that read, Monroe Mini Atomic Energy Center. Not real nuclear, not hazardous, not powered by uranium, just plywood, metal vents, paint, and spite. But I knew Denise. If I built it without backup, she would call the police, the fire department, NASA, and possibly the Vatican. So I needed bigger rules. The next morning, I called my cousin Evan, who worked as a safety inspector for an electrical contractor and had the emotional range of a parking meter. I need you to tell me whether a generator enclosure shaped like a nuclear power plant can be code compliant, I said. There was a pause. Is this HOA related? Yes. Is anyone actually using nuclear material? No. Then I'll be there after lunch. Evan arrived with a tape measure, a thermal clearance chart, and the dead-eyed patience of a man who had spent his career explaining electricity to people who thought breakers were decorative switches. He inspected the generator pad, measured clearances, checked ventilation paths, and told me the enclosure would be fine as long as the air intake and exhaust remained open, the roof panel was removable, and no combustible material sat near the hot parts. Can I make cooling towers? I asked. Fake ones? Yes. With vents? Yes. He looked at me. Hate that this is technically reasonable. That afternoon, I called Big Mike. Every neighborhood revenge story needs a contractor who hates HOAs, and Big Mike was mine. He owned a small fabrication shop, weighed roughly as much as a refrigerator, and believed most homeowners associations existed because some people had been denied authority in childhood and never recovered. Mike, I said, I need a generator enclosure. Boring. Shaped like a miniature nuclear power plant. Silence. Then a slow laugh rumbled through the phone. How miniature? Large enough to hide the generator, small enough to be decorative, ridiculous enough to make Denise Whitaker question her life choices. I'll bring sheet metal. By Saturday morning, my driveway looked like the staging area for a very petty government project. Mike showed up with 2 helpers, a trailer full of galvanized panels, curved plastic culvert sections for the fake cooling towers, and a custom sign he had made without telling me. It said, "Atomic Compliance Facility. No trespassing beyond this point without a clipboard." I nearly cried. We worked all day. The enclosure took shape fast. Gray panels around the base. 2 squat cooling towers rising behind it, each capped with hidden ventilation grills, a fake red warning beacon on top that did not light up because I was not giving Denise an electrical nuisance argument, little painted pipes along the side, a tiny pressure gauge that wasn't connected to anything. By sunset, the generator had vanished. In its place stood a 3-foot-tall, 6-foot-wide, completely absurd, beautifully ventilated miniature nuclear power plant beside my garage. My father came outside with his cane, stared at it for a full minute, and said, "Your mother would have hated this." I nodded. Then he smiled. Which means it's perfect. The next morning at 8:12, Denise's golf cart stopped so hard at my curb that the little basket on the back bounced. She stepped out slowly. Her sunglasses slid down her nose. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. That alone was worth the cost of materials. Finally, she pointed at the cooling towers and whispered, "Why is there a nuclear reactor on your side yard?" I walked down the driveway holding my coffee. "Not a reactor, Denise," I said. "A themed educational generator concealment structure." Her clipboard trembled. "It says atomic." "Yes, decorative branding." "It says no trespassing without a clipboard." "That part is mostly for you." Her face went red so fast it looked dangerous. "This is not over," she hissed. Behind her, my generator kicked on for its weekly test cycle, completely hidden inside its new atomic home. The fake cooling towers gently exhaled warm air. Denise took one step backward, and for the first time in Briar Hollow history, the HOA president looked afraid of architecture. Denise did not call it a generator enclosure. Denise called it an unauthorized industrial panic structure. That phrase arrived in my email at 9:04 Monday morning, written in bold red text, because apparently normal fonts were not emotionally violent enough. Attached was a formal emergency summons to the Briar Hollow Architectural Enforcement Committee, scheduled for that evening at 7. The charges were impressive: unauthorized utility structure, false hazardous materials presentation, visual terrorism, community panic inducement, misuse of educational display classification, failure to submit decorative intent documentation. Visual terrorism was my favorite. I printed the email, placed it neatly in a binder, and added it to the tab labeled Denise Losing Her Mind. Then I prepared. Because Denise's biggest weakness was that she believed outrage was evidence. She assumed if she sounded horrified enough, everyone else would simply accept that a violation had occurred. But I had spent the entire weekend doing the one thing HOA presidents fear most: reading. I had the HOA rule allowing miniature civic structures. I had photos showing the generator was fully concealed from roadway sightlines. I had Evans' written clearance assessment proving the enclosure was ventilated and removable. I had the manufacturer's generator safety guidelines. I had the city's emergency preparedness pamphlet recommending backup power for medical refrigeration and storm resilience. And because I am a thorough man, I had printed a full-color diagram explaining that my cooling towers were empty plastic ventilation shells and not, in fact, conducting nuclear fission beside my garage. At 6:45 that evening, I walked into the Briar Hollow clubhouse with my binder under one arm. The room was packed. Of course it was packed. Nothing brings suburban residents together like rumors of a private nuclear installation near the pool cabana. People were standing along the back wall, whispering like they expected me to start glowing. A man from 2 streets over was wearing a surgical mask. Another neighbor had brought binoculars, despite being indoors. Denise sat at the center of the board table in a cream blazer, pearls, and the expression of a woman preparing to save civilization from plywood. Beside her sat 3 board members: Linda, who looked nervous, Paul, who looked fascinated, and Arthur, a retired engineer who had already printed photos of my mini power plant and was studying them with suspicious enthusiasm. Denise slammed the gavel. "This emergency session concerns Lot 31, she announced, where homeowner Travis Monroe has responded to a simple generator concealment request by constructing what appears to be a nuclear power plant in a residential side yard." A murmur rolled through the room. I stood. "Miniature." Denise glared at me. "Excuse me?" "It appears to be a miniature nuclear power plant. Accuracy matters." Paul coughed into his fist. Denise continued, her voice tightening. "This board has received multiple concerns from residents who find the installation alarming, inappropriate, industrial, and potentially dangerous." "It is made of plywood and sheet metal," I said. "It has cooling towers. Vent covers. It says atomic. Branding. It has a warning sign. Educational flair." She slapped a printed photo on the table. "Mr. Monroe, do you deny that this structure is visible from the street?" "No." The room shifted. Denise smiled like she had caught me. I opened my binder. "I deny that the generator is visible from the street. Your notice ordered me to hide my generator. I did. Section 9, Paragraph D regulates visible mechanical equipment. The mechanical equipment is fully concealed." Arthur adjusted his glasses. "That is technically true." Denise turned sharply. "Arthur?" He raised both hands. "I said technically." I continued. "The exterior structure is not a generator. It is a decorative themed enclosure. Your own rules allow scale model educational displays, historical replicas, miniature civic structures, decorative architectural installations, and themed landscape features." I handed copies to the board. Paul read the highlighted line. "It does say miniature civic structures." Denise's face tightened. "A nuclear plant is not civic." Arthur leaned forward. "Power generation is absolutely civic infrastructure." The room murmured again. Denise looked betrayed by vocabulary. She pointed at me. "This is a mockery of the rules." "No," I said. "This is compliance with the rules after you mocked my father's medical needs." The room went quiet. I did not raise my voice. I didn't need to. "My generator keeps refrigerated medication safe during outages. You told me medical circumstances do not override aesthetic obligations, so I followed your aesthetic obligations. Fully, permanently, creatively." Linda looked at Denise. "You said that?" Denise stiffened. "I said homeowners must use the proper accommodation process." "You said it during a blackout," I replied, "while the generator was running." Arthur flipped through Evan's report. "The ventilation appears safe. The enclosure is removable. Clearances are marked. The generator isn't blocked." Denise grabbed her phone. "Then perhaps the fire department should determine that." The clubhouse doors opened before she could dial. Big Mike walked in wearing a clean button-down shirt that made him look like a bouncer at a city council meeting. Beside him was Evan, carrying a hard hat and a clipboard, and behind them walked Battalion Chief Marla Reyes from the county fire department. Denise lowered her phone. I smiled. "Funny you mention the fire department," I said. "I invited them. You know, a meeting has officially gone sideways when the HOA president is staring at a fire chief like the fire chief just walked in carrying a subpoena from God." Chief Marla Reyes was not dramatic. She was not emotional. She was not impressed by pearls, gavels, or emergency architectural committees. She was a compact woman in a navy uniform with silver hair pulled into a tight bun, and the calm, terrifying authority of someone who had spent 25 years walking into burning buildings while other people ran away from them. Denise stood frozen behind the board table. "Chief Reyes, this is a private HOA matter." Chief Reyes looked at the packed clubhouse, then at Denise's gavel, then at me. "Then why did my office receive 6 resident calls today asking whether there was an active nuclear facility in Briar Hollow Estates?" The room went dead silent. Gary from 2 streets over slowly lowered his binoculars. Denise's face twitched. "Residents were concerned because Mr. Monroe constructed a hazardous-looking industrial structure." "It is not hazardous," Chief Reyes said. "I inspected it this afternoon." Denise blinked. "You what?" I opened my binder to the final tab. Chief Reyes came by at 4. Big Mike folded his arms, looking deeply pleased with himself. Evan held up a clearance diagram like a proud, emotionally flat museum docent. Chief Reyes walked to the front table and placed a 1-page inspection summary in front of the board. "The structure is a decorative generator enclosure. The generator is properly ventilated. Exhaust clearance is adequate. Access panels are removable. Fuel is stored separately. No radiation symbols are present. No hazardous materials are present. and no fire code violation exists. Arthur leaned over the paper. Excellent airflow numbers. Denise snapped, "Arthur, stop enjoying this." Chief Reyes continued. More importantly, during storm season, backup power for medical refrigeration is a legitimate safety consideration. My office does not recommend forcing residents to remove emergency equipment when it is properly operated and safely placed. Linda's eyes moved from the inspection paper to Denise. So we can't order him to remove it? Not from a fire safety standpoint, Chief Reyes said. And if the HOA imposes rules that discourage safe generator placement, my office would have concerns. That word, concerns, hit the board table like a grenade. Paul straightened in his chair. What kind of concerns? The written kind, Chief Reyes said. Big Mike whispered, That's firefighter for don't be stupid. Several people laughed. Denise banged the gavel. Order! Chief Reyes gave the gavel one brief look, and somehow Denise stopped banging it. I stepped forward. Denise ordered me to hide the generator. I hid it. The generator is no longer visible. The enclosure is decorative, themed, safe, and allowed under the HOA's own rules. The only reason we are here is because Denise does not like the theme. It frightens residents, Denise insisted. A man in the back raised his hand. Honestly, I brought my grandson by to look at it. He wants to be an engineer now. Another neighbor said, My kid asked if we could build a mini water treatment plant around our pool pump. Arthur whispered, That would be civic infrastructure. Denise looked like she might start chewing the rule book. Linda cleared her throat. I moved to dismiss the violation against Lot 31 and approve the decorative generator enclosure as a themed landscape installation, subject to continued safe ventilation and no functional warning lights. Paul raised his hand. Second. Denise spun toward him. Paul? He shrugged. It hides the generator. That's what we asked for. All in favor? Linda asked. Linda raised her hand. Paul raised his. Arthur raised his so quickly his elbow popped. 3 votes. Denise's hand stayed flat on the table. The motion passes, Linda said. The fine is dismissed. The room erupted. Not crazy applause. Better than that. It was the sound of 50 homeowners realizing the empress of approved beige had just been beaten by a fake nuclear plant. Denise gathered her papers with the stiff, violent precision of someone trying not to scream in public. She looked at me once, then at Chief Reyes, then at the inspection report. This community used to have dignity, she whispered. No, I said. It had fear with landscaping. That got the biggest laugh of the night. 2 days later, the official HOA email arrived. My balance was 0. The enclosure was approved. The generator was listed in the records as decorative emergency power concealment structure. Denise tried to add a note saying, not precedent setting, but Arthur apparently removed it because, and I quote, precedent is exactly what minutes are for. The best part came during the next storm. Power went out at 11:40 p.m. The whole neighborhood went black. My generator kicked on inside the Monroe Mini Atomic Energy Center, humming safely behind its gray panels and fake cooling towers. My fridge stayed cold. My father's medication stayed safe. My sump pump kept the basement dry, and 3 different neighbors texted me asking for Big Mike's number. By the end of the month, Briar Hollow had 2 fake pump stations, 1 miniature weather radar dome hiding a pool heater, and a municipal water tower covering a propane tank. Denise stopped patrolling my street after that. She still drove her golf cart around, but whenever she passed my driveway, she looked straight ahead, pretending she could not see the little sign Big Mike added to the enclosure. Briar Hollow, Atomic Compliance Facility, powering petty justice. Since 2026. So remember this from Sovereign Verdict. Subscribe for more stories, read every rule twice, protect your family's safety, and if an HOA Karen tells you to hide your generator, do exactly what she says. Just make sure the thing hiding it requires a fire chief, 3 board votes, and a fake nuclear cooling tower.